Edit me, daddy.
Edit me, daddy.
Condemn me to hell, daddy.
If Marlowe was a daddy, what type of daddy would he be?
A twink.
You didn't even hesitate.
Marlowe is not a daddy. Marlowe likes daddies.
Books. Books. Books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It.
Hello.
The podcast that is horny for demons.
I can't beat that. Yeah.
The podcast that is a little anxious about the Reformation.
Oh.
Last episode, we wrapped up our quick, maybe not quite so quick, but
Quick and breezy.
we wrapped up our synopsis of the story of Faustus.
Mm-hmm. All his zany misadventures.
All his devil flirting.
Ooh.
And now we're gonna talk about it.
Now we're going to talk shit about it.
We're gonna talk a lot of shit
Yeah.
about a lot of people. A lot of dead people, and also maybe the concept of organized religion writ large. So, Lee,
Ready.
now that you've been run through it, at least in broad strokes, do you have any burning questions, threads you'd like to pick up?
Having a hard time not just focusing on his first date with Mephistopheles, traveling all around the world, picking on the Pope.
I will say the staging that I saw that the Globe did really leaned into the homoeroticism between him and Mephistopheles.
Yes.
And it was really sweet. Like
Aw.
darkly sweet.
Yeah.
But the homoeroticism, well, I should say, homoeroticism broadly pops up in a lot of Christopher Marlowe's work.
Really?
I know that we cannot broadly just be like, this historical figure was gay as a maypole.
Mm-hmm.
But Christopher Marlowe was not straight.
Is that a known fact?
More or less.
Cool. Was it, from what I have learned, we project our modern concept of sexuality onto history. And for much of history, sexuality was far more fluid or just wasn't really a big deal. And was that one of those times where they were just like, oh yeah, he gay, we don't care?
No,
they cared a lot? Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Like Elizabethan England, what am I trying to say here? Anytime you have a society where people are talking a lot about how important it is that we stamp out men having sex with other men,
Mm-hmm.
what that tells you is that men are having sex with other men. Right?
They talked about that a lot back then?
Because if it's not a thing that you're bumping up against,
Everyone's
with
like,
some,
that's weird. You keep bringing that up.
if it's not a thing you're bumping up against with some frequency, then it's not going to be a thing you're super worried about, is it?
Yeah. Okay.
It's a really interesting time period in that queer people have always existed.
Yeah.
And it's not considered, the idea of men having affairs with other men is not.
Are they just like, hey,
You can.
stop?
Homosexuality and homoeroticism and very, very passionate homosocial friendships are the kind of thing that you can get away with just fine as long as there is no other reason to suspect you of anything else.
Okay.
It's not the done thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely considered a sin. It's not considered, I believe this is one of the time periods where the thing about sodomy that you have to remember is that
The thing about sodomy.
the thing about sodomy from medieval England onward is that you have to remember that it basically means anything that is not procreative sex.
Oh, yeah.
And all sodomy is a sin. Does that make sense?
It does. And as a slight aside, I remember just to fill a credit, I took a religion class in college. And I remember there was this writing we read by, I believe, Aquinas that ranked the sinfulness of different forms of non-procreative sex into, and I don't,
Into subcategories.
Yeah.
Subsodomy.
Basically, I'm about to mention something that is, some people might not want to hear about. Rape and incest are more fine, are more okay than masturbation or gay sex because at least the form is correct. Not, because there can't be gay incest or gay rape.
I believe Thomas Aquinas was also one of the people who thought that women were in essence deformed men.
You're not? I'm not. No.
Thomas Aquinas, one of the most famous misogynists in history. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, Christopher Marlowe, Kit Marlowe, if you're feeling cute.
Oh.
What got us into this? You were asking
I don't
about
know.
we were asking about the queer. So one of Christopher.
The homoeroticism. We were talking about the homoeroticism of Faustus and Mephistopheles.
Yeah. Yeah, and like there's obviously like an intimacy that builds between them as
Yeah.
the play progresses, you know what I mean? The last thing he says is Mephistopheles.
Yeah.
And it's
You could interpret that a lot of different ways.
he's not calling out the devil's name. He's not calling out God's name. I don't know. I think the play would bear up to a really fun, like, queer theory reading about homoeroticism and temptation and Mephistopheles and Faustus as a doomed queer partnership.
Yeah. You know, just like a squishy, soft little reading of it too. It's kind of sweet that even, you know, even when we're doomed or like things are at their bleakest, you know, you still reach out for love and connection.
Yeah. And I mean, let's not forget that at like the 3/4 mark, Faustus is like, I'm going to kill myself. And Mephistopheles is like, here's a knife, bro. So like, you know.
Well, but does that count though? Because wouldn't he just be joining him in hell faster?
I guess that's true. That's a
Yeah.
good point. Well, they're together either way, really. See, and this is one of the reasons that I dislike the B text so much, because there's a whole thing at the end of the B text where Mephistopheles is like, I lied to you, very emphatically, like, I tricked you into selling your soul. And the villain monologuing at the end of the B text strips out a lot of the really rich nuance about Faustus's agency, the agency of any man in the face of sin and salvation.
Yeah.
It turns it into a significantly more straightforward morality play where an arrogant man is tricked by the devil.
Yeah. It's just boring and oversimplified.
The A text, you just don't know. Was he right all along? Was he damned to begin with? And this is what gets us into Calvinism and predetermination.
Yeah. Historical context.
Historical context.
Historical context coming your way.
So my lapsed Catholic friend over there.
What's up?
Broad strokes, what do you know about the Reformation, the Church of England, heretics?
I mean, the Church of England doesn't exist because Henry VIII wanted to
That's the one.
marry or divorce or get married again or
Wanted to divorce his wife and marry Anne Boleyn because she wouldn't boink him unless he married her,
yeah.
which was almost a really clutch move right up until she got beheaded.
From my understanding, the Church of England, the Anglican Church, yeah, it feels very similar in a lot of ways to the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it
They
did
just
kind
took
of
out a few inconvenient rules.
dogmatically. It landed much more on a wavelength with, you know, a lot of people make jokes about Episcopalianism being like Catholicism light.
Yeah.
But all of that happened as part of the Reformation, which was like the massive overarching
Move away from the Catholic Church.
schisming of the Catholic Church into basically the creation of Protestantism, right?
Yeah.
You've got Luther, you've got Calvin, you've,
All the other ones.
you know, the heavy hitters
Yeah.
of getting away from
I don't have to
Catholicism.
say them. You know them.
Yeah. By the time this play is written, we're in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. It's important to remember that Elizabeth I's reign was immediately preceded by Queen Mary I, who was a Catholic. You have Henry VIII, who like founds the Church of England. His son, who manages to stay alive for like a whopping 5 years.
He did his best.
Under a regency because he was a sickly child.
Oh.
Queen Mary takes the throne, says, JK, we're all Catholics again. Murders a bunch of Protestants.
Oh, babe. Not cool.
Not great. Queen Elizabeth takes the throne, says, JK, we're all Protestants again.
Does she do the murders?
There's a lot of murders.
Yeah. Okay. It just seems like that's what she did at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people will justify it by saying that, like, and I mean, I guess to be fair as anyone can ever be to like a monarch, right? Monarchies are
Monarchs deserve sympathy too.
Monarchies are inherently awful institutions, but basically for her entire reign, she was contending with very real conspiracies to overthrow her and put a Catholic back on the throne, right? So shit's wild.
Sounds pretty chill.
In the midst of all of this, Protestantism itself and the churches that are beginning to form from it, it's all very much up in the air.
Yeah.
The Church of England is still figuring out where it's going to land on different things. And one of the schools of thought that gains a bunch of traction and that is almost extinct now, none of the modern sects that descend from the sects back then still believe in this,
Yeah.
is predetermination.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to try really hard to explain predetermination, but the problem is that I've read the primary documents, or some of them. And the problem is that even the people who came up with this shit very rapidly devolve into circular logic when they're trying to explain it.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
I don't know.
So some of us are saved And some of us are damned. And God has made that decision before we are born.
Uh-huh.
And there is no way to know if you are saved or if you are damned, except that people who are saved will show that they're saved by acting like people who would be saved.
Can you hear me? Hitting my head against your very nice microphone.
And people who are damned will show they are damned by behaving like people who are damned.
That is up.
But they're very clear that just acting like you're a good person doesn't mean you are a good person. And just acting like a bad person doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person.
Can good people be damned and bad people be saved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way to know. Including.
Why?
And so here's the thing, right? Every religion that has like a concept of hell or some kind of eternal punishment, but especially Christianity, because they've got the whole baptism thing going on, eventually has to contend with the baby question.
Go on.
If your religion believes that unless you are baptized or something similar to baptism, that you are damned to eternal torment, and a baby dies before they are baptized,
Purgalicious.
does the baby just go to hell?
Original sin. Yeah.
So here's the thing. That is one of the big reasons that Catholicism has well, I think that's one of the... Anyway, the moral of the story is Catholicism has purgatory, right?
Yeah.
Unbaptized babies go to purgatory. They hang out there for, I don't remember how long.
I don't know. I feel like it's a long time.
And then they cycle out eventually. Like they'll be fine by Judgment Day is the point, right?
It's like, I don't know.
Predetermination essentially says that
Those babies.
Predetermination basically says that if your baby dies before it's baptized, that God hated it and it's going to hell.
But baptizing it could have saved it, even if it was predetermined to go to hell?
No, it's basically like because the baby died, it was probably like God was one of the damned souls.
Man.
There's actually, because I swear people aren't going to believe me. I'm going to see if I can find.
That's fucked up.
It's very dark.
Ugh.
I'm trying. I do not think people will believe me unless I read to you out of, okay.
This is what Norton says.
And also they don't have purgatory. They got rid of purgatory. There is no purgatory in Protestantism in the Church of England at this time. So yeah, original sin. There's no such thing as free will. So I've got here a chunk of writing from a man named William Perkins.
All right, William.
Who was a Cambridge-based theologian, and he is writing about, so the term he uses here for the people who are not chosen, the people who have been damned by God, is reprobates. And he says, reprobates are either infants or men of riper age. In reprobate infants, the execution of God's decree is this: as soon as they are born, for the guilt of original and natural sin being left in God's secret judgment unto themselves, they dying are rejected of God forever.
When did he write that? Do you know when that was?
This was in 1590.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
It's pretty grim.
Why?
You think about Faustus in the through the lens of predetermination.
Yeah.
Faustus's conclusion that he is already damned, that he and Mephistopheles both are and were already damned.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't, even if I didn't sell my soul to the devil, I was already damned.
Why are you thinking so much of heaven when it was never an option for you to begin with?
Yeah.
It's not unreasonable.
Yeah. 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 I mean, wow, you're right that this was like controversial. This was like a hot take at the time. Like controversial shit at the time. You know?
It definitely, like, Marlowe was very controversial as a figure. He was like a literary bad boy. He was always getting in trouble. But, I think it's the A text is borderline heretical.
Yeah.
And you can get away with it because he suffers at the end.
Yeah.
And it's doing that thing that people in Theocracies have been doing forever, which is you fill the body of the work itself with a bunch of really controversial questions that you never really answer. And then at the end you're like, oh yeah, and then he was punished, blah 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 blah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, off to hell, bye.
Yeah. The censorship powers that be are like, okay, I guess I'll let this one slide.
Pretty much. Yeah. They're just like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And, that presupposes that the censors were terribly bright, which, as we all know, lots of people aren't.
Whoa, Grace.
I mean, you can gin up in your head an imaginary argument, right, with a young, clever, talented playwright and a censor, and the playwright being like, no, you don't, I can completely understand how you would have thought that was controversial, but look, let me talk you through it.
Yeah.
Here's what people are going to take away from it.
Mm-hmm.
What they're going to take away from it is that Faustus should never have sold his soul to begin. I am a good Christian man.
Yeah.
I am a
Sir.
I went to Cambridge for theology. So, jumping off of predetermination and into religion and the Reformation more broadly, I think it really helps approaching this play, both the A text and the B text, to remember that, A of all, Marlowe was definitely accused of being an atheist.
Oh.
Like an out-and-out atheist.
Oh.
And again, the play gets really interesting if you start thinking about, like, one of the things that Faustus says, and one of the things that Faustus is trying to convince himself of, is that there is actually no afterlife.
Yeah.
That the soul just dies with the body.
Yeah.
I imagine it was probably very hard to be an atheist in Elizabethan England.
Yeah.
When you live in a theocratic society, I think, regardless of who you are, it is hard not to second guess what you think happens around death, right? No matter where you are, who you are in history, it's the biggest question none of us will ever answer.
Yeah.
And whether you think something happens, whether you think nothing happens, I think it is very difficult to carry any degree of certainty through life with you at all times.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you live in a theocratic society, that's probably much harder because you are just steeped constantly in other people's certainty.
Yeah.
But England at the time of this play, and Cambridge, where Marlowe went to school, and Canterbury, where Marlowe grew up, would have been deeply strange places from a religious perspective. Because in Marlowe's lifetime, right, you have people who are being martyred for the Catholic side, and you have people who are being martyred for the Protestant side. And essentially, the year Marlowe's father is born is the closing year of the Reformation Parliament, which is the legal body that makes Henry VIII the head of the English Church.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the year that Marlowe's father is born.
Okay.
And then you run through those monarchies that I kind of trotted through earlier, right? Henry VIII, Edward, Mary I, Elizabeth. All of those things happen within living memory.
Yeah.
Where first it's Protestants being martyred by Catholics, and then it's Catholics being martyred by Protestants, and then it's Protestants being martyred by Catholics, and then it's Catholics being martyred by Protestants. Again, in maybe 2 lifetimes.
Yeah.
In 2 adulthoods.
Very tumultuous.
I think it would be beyond a lot of thinking people to live through 50 years of that and have a blithely uncomplicated faith.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Well, and that's the thing about like a theocracy too, is that it's not just a matter of personal belief. It's like a political matter as well.
Right.
Know?
Yeah. And that's, one of the things you mentioned earlier, the way that we look back and we assume that queerness is like, we project our contemporary ideas about queerness on the past. I think we tend to assume that people in the past, people living under theocracies, interpersonally were more religious than a lot of them probably were. Because I think, again, it would be, I mean, you think about living under a theocracy like that, right?
Yeah.
In your lifetime, having at least 3 different people ascend to the crown and be like, you all go to a different church now.
Yeah. And if you don't, I will kill you.
Yeah. Just like, well, we're all Protestants now. We're all Catholics now. We're all Protestants again. That's not how religion works.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully.
That's not how faith works.
Yeah.
So wherever you land on the question, either you're lying half the time or you don't really care, or like a lot of people, maybe you believe in God kind of abstractly, but a lot of the dogma leaves you sort of cold.
Yeah.
I think there were probably a lot of people by the end of all that who were like, I don't. And not to mention...
Just tell me what to say.
Not to mention there's like 4 or 5 waves of plague interspersed through all of this, right?
Never forget the plague.
Never forget. So like I think there were probably a lot of people, especially a lot of intellectuals, especially a lot of academics.
Yeah, you said Cambridge and other intellectual institutions were weird places at the time.
Yeah, well, because of all of this.
Yeah.
Like
They're just like, what?
and like
What can we say?
right, and like you don't say things like this in a theocracy. You don't sit around writing post-it notes to yourself that are like, God isn't real.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of thinking people probably were like, yeah, I don't God, what is God doing for me?
Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah.
We're setting people on fire every other week. The idea that Christopher Marlowe was an actual, like an out and out atheist is not surprising at all.
Yeah, it's not surprising, but he would have had to, but he couldn't like be super public about it, you know? And if you're going to work those, oh, you look like you're about to correct me.
No, I mean, you couldn't. Like he got in trouble.
For this play or just in general?
So, okay. I'm going to try and give you a very quick and dirty biography of Christopher Marlowe.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
So he was very...
Chrissy M.
Okay. Now, there's a fun biography and there's a not so fun biography.
There's a biography A and a biography B.
Kind of. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. But unlike with the... Well, actually, no. Just like with the play. We're going to go with mostly the more fun biography. And I'll try and tell you where things are sort of tenuous.
Okay.
And keeping in mind that this is the Elizabethan era and their record keeping was very bad. So, Christopher Marlowe, born in Canterbury, christened February 26th, 1564. Son of a...
Good year.
It was excellent year.
Great year.
Son of a shoemaker,
Ah.
like a barely literate shoemaker, who seems to distinguish himself quite early for being quite smart, manages to make it not just through primary school, but then into higher and higher education on the basis of scholarships.
Wow.
So he like definitionally is actually a self-made man.
Yeah.
Does very well at Cambridge, gets his bachelor's degree, stays for his master's degree, gets a scholarship for that too.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize they had scholarships at the time, but it makes sense.
Yeah, no, and the Renaissance England, but also the Renaissance sort of broadly, was one of those time periods where you were seeing an increase in sort of meritocracy. Like you were seeing more kind of self-made men.
Yeah.
Men who were being allowed to claw their way into the upper classes.
Okay.
And it's while he is wrapping up his master's degree at Cambridge that things get weird for the first time.
Uh-oh.
He disappears for a while.
Oh.
He's gone from Cambridge.
Oh.
And then we have some correspondence that's from Queen Elizabeth's Privy Council writing to the scholars at Cambridge saying basically like, we know you heard some weird rumors about stuff that Marlowe was up to, and we know that you heard that he might be sneaking off to the continent to go to a Catholic college, which would be a huge no-no.
Yeah.
But none of that is true, and he's been doing some favors for the crown, and could you just go ahead and give him his degree? That would be nice, even though
That's weird.
So everyone thinks that he was a spy.
Twist.
For the crown.
I did not expect this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, that's why he's like one of the bad boys of literature.
Yeah.
Right? So he goes to Cambridge, things are going very well, and then this weird thing happens where he just like disappears, and then
And the crown's like, don't worry about it.
the crown yeah.
They're like, we know you didn't even think that we would be, you might be wondering why we're even inserting ourselves into this matter, but don't also worry about that, okay?
Yeah, shh, it's fine. It's fine. He is given his degree.
Because the monarch said so.
Because reasons. And then he goes off to London and becomes a playwright and is very successful very quickly.
Good for him.
At the time, I actually jotted this quote down from good old Constance.
Oh.
During the late 1580s and early 1590s, Marlowe was the most admired, envied, and widely imitated playwright in London.
You know, and if Connie uses adjectives like that, you know they're toned down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know she means it.
Yeah, he was big stuff.
Around this time, we also start to have some evidence that maybe he has a little bit of a penchant for getting into bar fights.
Uh-oh, bad boy.
Yeah.
Wow. Insert Harley noise here.
So one of the things that Constance points out in this biography is, you know, I mentioned earlier kind of like the Renaissance self-made man thing, but as in any society that has a functioning aristocracy, that only goes so far.
Yeah.
And a lot of young men who manage to like claw their way up, especially through scholarships or through some kind of talent, quickly found that their employment prospects were not very good.
It's a big old Elizabethan ceiling.
Unless they like gained patrons.
Oh, yeah.
At which point they basically became the lapdogs of men that they were much smarter than, right?
Yeah. Bummer.
Because they're never going to be nobility.
Yeah.
They can like kind of rub elbows with nobility. They can kind of pretend like they belong,
Yeah.
but they don't at the end of the day. And they'll never be allowed to forget that.
Yeah.
And that's psychologically very difficult. It's even more difficult, as she points out, when you come up through academia and you're consistently being praised and rewarded for your own intellect. And then you get out in the real world and like nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're the son of a shoemaker.
Yeah. They're like, you think he's smart.
So he seems to have a little bit of a temper. Things are going broadly very well, but there's a couple of little weird bits of legal trouble. And then he's arrested for counterfeiting Dutch currency in the Netherlands.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, take a little holiday, getting a little counterfeit. Oopsie, can't say I haven't been there.
Nobody knows what the hell this is about. There's no way to know.
It was just a goof. It was just a little oopsie.
Your guess is as good as any historian's.
He's just having a little fun.
Some people say that he got arrested on purpose because he was acting as a double agent and he was trying to kind of like...
still a spy. The best place to hide is in plain sight as a successful playwright.
Basically.
In London's hot literary art scene.
Well, I mean, being a playwright is not going to pay that many bills, even when he is successful.
You got to forge Dutch coins.
Yeah. So like some people will say that he was trying to build street cred so that he could... because he was acting as like a double agent and he was trying to ingratiate himself with an underground Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
Like a ring of
deep undercover
Catholics who were trying to overthrow the queen.
Where's this action movie?
Honestly, right?
What's that?
But also like
the Marlowe identity.
There
the
you
Marlowe
go. Ooh.
Supremacy.
The
Marlowe ultimatum.
I'm just imagining Matt Damon in like a long wig and like pantaloons. Doublet.
Yeah.
Running through a green screen of old-timey
Yeah.
London.
Yeah. Real low budget.
With a sheaf of papers in one hand and like a very small knife in the other.
Yeah.
Marlowe.
Tricked again by Marlowe the spy.
It's so weird.
That's a colorful life.
Well, we're not done yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Keep going, Christopher.
So the next thing that happens is 1592 appears to kind of be when the bottom falls out of his life.
Aw.
Because there's a round of plague. The theaters all close. People are publicly accusing him of being an atheist and also being queer.
Uh-oh. That's not what you want to see.
Which he probably is.
Yeah.
One of the things that someone will say at one of the trials he winds up on.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Is that he liked to go around saying basically that anyone who didn't like tobacco or boys was a moron. And I love that for him.
Yeah.
I read that and I immediately was like, okay, he's going up on a shelf next to Oscar Wilde in my head now.
Yeah.
He was very witty and also very blasphemous.
Yeah.
He gets into another altercation and is arrested again. And then in 1593,
the next year,
he is stabbed to death.
Oh.
With his own knife.
Oh.
Which was either a political assassination or a dumb bar fight.
Oh my God. And no one knows.
And again, Constance is like, look, we have a man with a track record of having a short temper. We know he was sensitive about things. And sometimes people just get stabbed to death in dumb ways, even if they are geniuses. And then there's academics stretching through history being like, but what if? And I don't know, man. Constance doesn't even really think that he was a spy. Maybe a messenger of some kind, but Constance is not buying it.
Yeah.
But it's so much more fun to think he was a spy. And
I mean, how are we defining spy?
Right? And if you're already deciding he's a spy, then maybe it was a political assassination. Who knows?
It's a great cover.
Right? Stabbed in the eye with your own knife.
In the eye, you say?
In the eye.
Ouchie.
Yeah, and he was only 30-something. He was a young man.
He was that young?
Yeah. He had a short life.
Oh. Well, dang, I didn't expect that ending.
I know. The fun thing about the Elizabethan era is that there's so little textual documentation, but there's just enough. Like, have you ever heard like a little knowledge is a dangerous thing?
Oh, yeah.
There's just enough textual documentation that people can create these really tantalizing kind of frameworks.
Yeah.
You know, at best you can prove like, okay, they were here on this date, they were here on this date. We have one letter, another letter from a few years later. And so you have this really seductive kind of structure that you can then project whatever you want on.
And that's my favorite thing to do.
It's so fun.
I love projecting.
And honestly, I feel like for an extraordinarily talented poet and playwright who died too soon, what better gift can we give him from beyond the grave than to make his life story as sensational as humanly possible?
He's like, make my funeral fun.
Anyone who doesn't love tobacco and boys is a fool.
I mean, that's a good quote.
I love him. So
I can't believe he was so young.
I know. It's very sad.
Yeah, I
mean, here, let me double check my math. He was christened 1564 and he died in 1593.
Yeah, 29, right?
Well, you have to remember, christened doesn't mean born.
Oh, right.
There's a lag.
So he could have been like
30,
31, 32.
Minus. Yeah, so he was in his early 30s probably.
Yeah. You know who else was in his early 30s?
Satan?
Sure.
So one of the things that I forgot to include in the last episode that is one of my favorite little details about this play is early in the play, Faustus is like, why does Lucifer want the souls of humans?
Good question.
And Mephistopheles says, and I'm going to say it first in Latin and then I'm going to translate it for you.
Oh, okay.
You ready?
Wait, say it in Latin and then let me guess what it means.
Okay. Solamen miseris socios habuis doloris.
And that's probably perfect pronunciation. Don't second guess yourself. Never doubt yourself ever for any reason.
That was Faustus's problem, actually.
I know. You're like, no, we just read a whole thing.
We just talked about it.
It sounded like something about, I don't know, like men being miserable or pain or something like that.
To the unhappy, it is a comfort to have had company in misfortune, which also translates to misery loves company.
Oh, so Lucifer's sad? Oh,
Lucifer is a sad boy who wants you to be sad with him.
He's just a toxic sad boy who's just trying to take everyone along with him.
He was cast out of heaven, and so now he wants other people to be...
He's like, come to my shitty party. Come to my shitty record release.
I just think that's really funny.
I wonder if that's where that phrase came from.
I looked it up because I was curious too. Because there were a couple turns of phrase in here where I was like, that's from here? Especially the whole speech with Helen was like, was this the face that launched 1,000 shots? I was like, that was Marlowe? Oh, clever boy. He's referencing another writer in that. So there are so many intertextual references.
Am I an intertextual?
I thought we decided you were a metatextual.
I guess so. Got some new things to think about.
Metatextual in the streets.
Intertextual in the sheets. Yay.
I was sitting very quietly giggling to myself for like an hour the other day because I was trying to find a particular edition of a book, and what popped into my head unbidden was...
How long is it going to take you to say it? She's laughing very hard right now.
Norton Critical Edition in the streets. Penguin Cloth-Bound Classics Edition in the sheets.
That is so niche.
It is a joke just for me. But it makes me laugh so hard.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Again, the merch ideas write themselves.
It's true. It's true. Except at least one of those publishing houses would probably sue me.
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking about...
I don't know anymore.
Marlowe's death. And the spy. I think the last thing that you said that was...
interesting.
Content. that was relevant.
At all usable.
Just the last thing we were talking about that was relevant was sort of choosing to interpret the most flamboyant version of Marlowe's biography because it's fun.
It is fun, and we deserve that. So I am curious. I mean, obviously, this play was released after his death, and it has clearly stood the test of time. It was very popular upon its release.
Incredibly popular on its release. It was performed a lot in it, and it stayed in performance for a long time.
That's very interesting to me because now knowing with context that it was pretty controversial, and was asking some really big questions, I just almost find that surprising. I'm not surprising that it was popular, but more like surprising that it was allowed. You know what I mean?
I mean, people are very good at seeing the interpretations they want to see in things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was helped by the fact that Marlowe's death was...
That's great. You can't buy that kind of marketing.
Well, and it was irresistible to the moralizers of the time.
Oh.
It was presented as...
See?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like 100%. And it added to the mythos. And there were all of these... especially starting in about the a while after, decades after, there started to be all of these sort of urban legends and rumors about supernatural occurrences during performances of the play.
Oh my.
There were stories that all the devils came out on the stage and the actors realized on stage that there was one too many devils and that the real Satan showed up and that the theater made a scary noise. There were all these rumors about like supernatural things happening.
Interesting.
It doesn't hurt either that for a long time the B text was the version that was circulating, which is the one that is much more straightforwardly selling your soul to the devil is bad, and that's where Mephistopheles is like, I lied to you, and where the good angel and the bad angel and Lucifer and Mephistopheles all come on stage to be like, ha ha, we got you. It's no surprise that that was the version that circulated much more popularly.
Yeah.
There was a big surge in Elizabethan drama and interest in Marlowe specifically in the 1800s.
Oh, interesting.
Like Victorian era.
Yeah.
And it's very funny because I was reading some criticisms and reviews of this play from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And I have all these margin notes that are just like, what the fuck?
No.
Because...
Oh boy.
Let me see if I can find a couple of them. The way that people in the 1800s, the way that these Victorian dudes were writing about Elizabethan dudes is so funny.
I don't know what to think. I'm looking forward to this.
It's just so unself-aware.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. There's one just says, There's all these dudes in the 1800s who just apparently take this completely at face value and do not think that anyone in the 1500s was capable of metaphors. Here's one. Indeed, the ignorance and barbarism of the time, as here described, might almost justify Faustus's overstrained admiration of learning and turn the heads of those who possessed it from novelty and unaccustomed excitement. And there I'm going to stop reading because then he says something racist.
No. In the Victorian era? Who could have foreseen that?
Oh, here's another one. Here, you're going to love this. What may be called the poetry of science, the love of knowledge for its own sake, is a recent invention, like the love of picturesque scenery and the arts of spelling act. No, let me finish. No, let me finish. You ready?
Okay.
Like the love of picturesque scenery and the arts of spelling accurately and speaking decently and modestly.
Oh my God. The art of picturesque scenery?
The same guy later says, Honest Kit himself never doubted the personality of angel or devil. He gives us Dr. Faustus in all good faith, without skeptical reservation, cold realism, or metaphysical abstraction. To Marlowe, Faustus is an entity, a genuine living man, a real personage making a real compact with a real devil, and paying the penalty with body and soul. In reading Marlowe's remarkable work, it is impossible to imagine that the author doubted the possibility of the events he puts before the spectator. This simple faith gives a genuineness to the tragical history of Dr. Faustus. Marlowe's work is the outcome of an undoubting mind, not the statement of a great problem yet unsolved.
I don't know what to say. What a douche.
And the last thing, same guy. Nothing would have been farther from Marlowe's purpose than to shake popular belief in an actual fixed place of eternal punishment.
You read it wrong.
That's
like the whole thing.
And here, if you look, I've just got what? And then And then, no. No.
The classic teacher's note when they just can't even believe what you just wrote. Just like, no! Exclamation point.
It is so funny to me.
That's bad.
Yeah. And it's, on the one hand, these Victorian morons are like a big part of why Marlowe survived. There was a huge uptick of interest in Elizabethan drama on the part of the Victorians. And so a bunch of stuff was tracked down and properly archived and reissued, and scholarship was done.
Yeah.
But my God.
It's like, that poor little dum-dum, he wrote a real nice story.
I feel like it's very easy to forget in the era and the intellectual sphere in which you and I kind of operate, in which most people I know operate, which is pretty straightforwardly like, people are people. Throughout history, people had access to more and less information depending on the time. They were still just people.
Yeah, we're not breaking ground over here in 2023.
Yeah, people are vast. They contain
done.
multitudes. There were always queer people. There were always atheists. There have always been people who looked at structures of power and went like,
hey.
And I forget sometimes that the sort of trend for a really long time, especially in the Victorian era, but they weren't the only ones who did it, was to look at the past and go, those fragile morons.
Those beautiful idiots.
And it was very important to the Victorians to maintain this illusion because it's what gave them their sense of superiority.
It's what legitimized all of their awful power grabs.
All of their insanity.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense that would be an ethos that came out of colonialization, right? As you have got to look at the past of England and Western Europe as one never-ending upslope of progress.
Progress, civilization. Yeah.
Because if you look at the people you are brutally murdering and you look at the not that distant past of your own country and you're like, these things look not dissimilar.
La 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 la. No.
You really need a way to like eugenics yourself right past that problem.
Yeah.
And on this podcast, we will be touching on a lot of literature that stems from various people trying to eugenics themselves right past that problem.
Eugenics is everywhere.
It is
everywhere.
Constant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It is like...
It is recent.
I think of it as like a background hum to our entire culture.
No, for real.
And you have to be careful because it is so insidious that you can fall into it without realizing you're doing it.
Yeah. That is one thing I've become even more aware of recently as I follow like activists across a variety of fields, is that there was this conception of, I think we have this concept of eugenics as like, oh, this kind of wackadoo fringe movement, like for a short amount of time in history a while ago. And it's like, no, it was so widespread. It affected every aspect of daily like society and life. It was everywhere for a long time until very recently, and its after effects are very much around.
Yeah, I mean, even in Western society that predates eugenics, one of the reasons that eugenics exists is because it was a continuation of a much older thought about the aristocracy and rule by birthright. It's the same thing wearing a different hat.
Yeah, like before I mean, this is just my obviously very scrambled sense of history, but like in my mind, I always connected to it's like, okay, well, before it was called eugenics, it was called manifest destiny. And like before it was called that, it was called, blah, blah, blah. Like it just pops up all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the idea that certain people are intrinsically fit to be in charge is just, it just goes back forever. But yeah, all of which is to say,
determination.
I am not sure I have managed to record a single episode of this podcast yet where eugenics has not come up.
And I don't think you ever will.
Probably not. Eugenics, it's in your literature. Except not really in this one, funnily enough.
No, I'd say this one has a pretty narrow focus. It's mostly just about Faustus looking at himself, right?
Faustus is standing in for mankind.
You didn't say that. Wait a minute.
You mean there's metaphor in here?
I thought they didn't understand metaphor.
I mean, to drag us back from eugenics broadly and into the play, predestination and eugenics are cozy bedfellows.
Yeah, you can draw a pretty clear line between the two.
But, the play, in honing in so deeply on the psychology of uncertainty, if we accept that Marlowe is a spy,
he is,
and was operating probably as some kind of like an undercover agent, as people have speculated, one of the things that you can draw out of this play is that Dr. Faustus is actually slung between two incredibly powerful forces, neither of which actually care about him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's in the center of a power struggle, which is going to be enacted on his body no matter what he does.
Yeah.
And he has very little control over it.
That doesn't sound familiar to what was happening at the time at all.
No, not even a little.
What a totally random idea.
Not for a man who was a spy, and not for a man who was... you think about living in England at this point, when it's just like, who is threatening me with death now?
Yeah.
Oh, now the plague is here.
Yeah. Just getting caught in between these, like you just said, like these systems that just don't give a fuck about you.
Yeah, and I mean...
You're just expendable,
And Faustus is really the only human we spend any time with. You've got Lucifer, Mephistopheles, lots of assorted devils. You've got the good angel, the bad angel.
You got the little old man who comes and hangs out.
You've got the old man. He doesn't show up until quite late in the play.
Oh.
And he really only shows up to talk shit about Faustus being damned. So, like, he technically talks him out of suicide, but it's not kind. He's kind of nagging him the whole time.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it's never too late if it weren't for the fact that you're a disgusting heathen that God hates. So
mean.
Bummer for you.
There's the goofy servants.
The goofy servants are fun, although they get turned into a dog and a monkey.
Yeah.
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 It's a bummer.
Well, they were probably predetermined to be.
They were, yeah, they had no choice. But like, Faustus is constantly asking himself what he's done and why. And
like, oh God, what have I done? Was it worth it? Why'd I do this?
Yeah. Wretch, what hast thou done? Damned art thou, Faustus. Damned, despair and die. Hell calls for right, and with a roaring voice says, Faustus, come, thine hour is come, and Faustus will come to do thee right. The internal tension, the internal torture, it really feels in so many junctures of the play like he doesn't feel like he has any agency at all.
Yeah. And
one of the things that is changed in the B text is that there are a lot of places where it's originally said can repent. Faustus, can you repent? Faustus, can't repent. They change it to will. Faustus, will you repent?
It's the A version that says can. Okay.
I don't know. Can he? Like, just like your obnoxious elementary school teacher.
Can you?
But can he?
Yeah, that is much more interesting.
And what's the point?
Yeah.
If God and the devil are fighting each other, if they are having a proxy war across Faustus's body, what agency does he really have in the face of these two incredibly powerful beings who it kind of
that
seems
control everything?
If God wanted to save him, he would.
Yeah.
And there are points where Faustus is at least kind of indirectly asking for some... If the good angel's going to keep showing up and be like, it's not too late, it's not too late. There are scenes where it kind of seems like he's asking for some proof, a sign.
Yeah.
Give me something.
Yeah.
The devil's here. The devil's right here and he's handing me stuff.
Yeah.
And all you people up there, you're just asking me to take this on faith?
Yeah.
When maybe I'm damned anyway? Seems pretty uncaring.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm kind of just summarizing what you've already said. But, you know, he's this figure who got as far as he could individually, took the next, you could argue is the next logical step that someone in that position would. And at that point, there are no good choices. Yeah, and it's kind of revealed that he didn't really have any agency all along. Yeah.
Would he have been able to make more use of the powers he got from the devil if he hadn't been an upstart? Maybe. Would he?
Well, because then the narrative is then brought back on you like, well, now it's an individual failing, you know? And it's like, it's because you couldn't handle this responsibility. It's because you couldn't, you know, your choices, your personal responsibility, you know, you couldn't do it. When it's like, what could he have ever done? Could he have saved everyone from going to hell? You know, like there's a limit. What could he have ever even done?
Yeah.
Really, I guess he could have like cured hunger or something.
There's so much hiding in this play.
There really is, yeah.
Like there's so much going on here. And honestly, thank you for bringing up what you said a minute ago, because there is a really interesting subtext here of personal responsibility versus systemic failings.
Yeah.
Sort of writ cosmologically large.
Yeah.
You know, whose fault is it that Faustus has fallen?
Yeah.
Faustus's?
Was it set up? I mean, this is just such the language that we are using all the time now. Was it set up to work exactly as intended? You know, like
something.
Was this just the bargain doing its job? Like, you know,
something Wurtemberg College to Hell pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you give an academic a magic book, he's gonna want to talk to Satan. But I mean, yeah, like it's bananas, and I love it. I love how much is lurking in here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that you can tease out and play with and kind of explore.
Yeah.
As I do with all of these episodes, I tried to ingest like a broad swath of sort of literary interpretations, literary criticism, and people talked about how you can interpret this play as an inversion of like a saint's life.
Okay.
You grew up Catholic, you know some saints' lives probably, or at least how they're structured.
Kinda.
Saints' lives as narratives, it's usually first they didn't know about God, and then they found out about God, and then someone tried to take them away from God, and then they said, no, I'm sticking with God, and then they usually die horrifically.
Yeah. We weren't really saintsy Catholics. I don't know. I don't know why I kind of thought that all Catholics were saintsy Catholics, but yeah, you'd think so.
Fair
I
enough.
don't really know much about saints, I'm realizing.
What'd you do in Sunday school? Did you not learn about saints?
You know, a lot of times we didn't go to Catholic Sunday school.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Did you just sit through Mass?
Sat through Mass and then went to Protestant
What?
Sunday school sometimes. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we also moved every couple of years, so it was a
Oh,
different
yeah.
church every few years, you know.
Fair enough. Good
Yeah.
point. So all of that's to say,
Anyway.
hashtag army brat. It's a miracle you didn't sell your soul.
Who's to say I didn't? How do you think this podcast is racing through the charts to number 1?
Yeah, we'll go with that. No, I read one piece that was talking about how the play functions as kind of an inversion of the standard structure of saints' lives, which with Marlowe would have been very familiar.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting take.
Yeah.
They also talked about the influence of morality plays
Uh-huh.
on this play, and morality plays had kind of gone out of style. They weren't really popular anymore.
Interesting.
So he's kind of specifically invoking something pretty old school
Yeah.
in order to tinker with it, subvert it, like
Yeah.
play with it. He's a really interesting guy.
A smart dude.
And I wish he hadn't died.
Yeah. Was this idea, was kind of the general, well, you just said what might have influenced it, but is this kind of the first time is this the first time that this is used, or is it kind of a popular, is this the first like big deal with the devil piece of literature, or was that kind of had been used before?
So the play is based, so Faust is a old legend,
Oh.
sort of cautionary tale from Germany.
Oh.
A translated version of, so there was a chapbook called the Faust book.
A what now?
Chapbook.
A chapbook?
It's basically a shorter, think like not quite a novel,
Okay.
like a
novella.
smaller, a skinnier.
Yeah. A zine.
They make for, essentially, yeah. They
Okay.
make for easier distribution.
Okay.
There was a chapbook that made it to England and was translated into English from German that appeared in London probably not very long before Marlowe wrote the play.
Oh, interesting.
So he was riffing on like an existing story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also important to remember, for anyone out there broadly unfamiliar, like most of Shakespeare's plays
Yeah.
were riffing on existing, like this is just
Yeah.
what people did.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that no one is out there being like, well, that's plagiarism. It's like, well, kind of, but also no one cared then.
Yeah, that's just like that's how stories evolved.
That's just what people
Yeah.
did. There are a lot of departures from, so the Faust book, which I'm just going to, it's just too fun to say,
Yeah.
is like the B text, much more like a straightforward Faust learned to do magic and it was bad. And where the play departs from the book is kind of in these long sequences of sort of psychological horror.
Yeah.
And in Mephistopheles having a kind of complicated character where like you don't know if he's lying, you don't know if he's telling the truth for most of the play, if not the entire play. He doesn't talk to the audience much. In Elizabethan drama, like you get people talking to the audience all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's how you make up for the lack of interiority.
Yeah.
Faustus is talking to the audience constantly. Mephistopheles only talks to the audience once. He looks at us early in his negotiations with Faust and he says, "Oh, what would I not do for his soul?"
Interesting.
And that's like the only time he addresses us.
I wonder why Marlowe did that.
So many, I mean, it's because it makes Mephistopheles a significantly more interesting character.
Yeah.
It does feel like Marlowe understood some really interesting and complex things about characterization and interiority and psychology. Like,
when it puts the audience like more in Faustus's place, you know, and you're like, well, what do you think Mephistopheles? What?
Mephistopheles.
What do you think Mephistopheles is saying to you? You know, do you believe him?
It does, yeah. I mean, I think it definitely forces some empathy. It forces some ambiguity, some nuance, all of which would have been in pretty short supply with a lot of the other stuff that was being made at the time. So Shakespeare was a contemporary of Marlowe's whose career took off basically like right after he died, which is where you get all of the...
Where was he that night?
Well, so there's a lot of... there are a lot of conspiracy theories that Christopher Marlowe was William Shakespeare. Well, not conspiracy theories. That sounds mean. But there are people out there who think that Christopher Marlowe basically like faked his own death and then became William Shakespeare.
My name's William Shakespeare now.
Which I'm not buying it.
I was just suggesting that Shakespeare was the one who killed him in the bar fight.
Maybe.
You heard it here first.
I mean, there were 3 people who were charged with his murder and then lit off on self-defense.
Interesting. This is now a murder podcast. This is now a true crime podcast.
True crime podcast just about the Elizabethan era, though.
Yeah.
We are only...
We have no evidence.
No evidence, no conclusions, no witnesses, and no way of getting any of them.
Each episode is 5 hours long.
We're doing 1 murder per season.
Yeah.
This is now a Christopher Marlowe murder podcast.
I wish I could think of a snappy name real quick, but I can't.
Well,
you're like, anyway, please.
No, I mean, I think as with every piece of literature that we cover here, I could talk about this for like 8 more hours.
Well, there is one thing that we haven't covered yet.
What's that?
Which are modern interpretations of the story.
Yeah, thank you. Take me there. So you've got an overview of Faustus. You've got an overview of sort of the themes. You've got an overview of the historical context. Where, if anywhere, now that you've been sort of sitting on it for a chunk of time, where do you see this mirrored, projected, still living, still with us?
Bedazzled.
Yes.
This is now a Bedazzled podcast.
Brendan Fraser may not be the Faustus we deserve, but he's the Faustus that we need.
Yeah.
I have not seen that movie since... I have not seen that movie in a long time.
It is... Not all parts of it hold up, but there's some comedy gold in there.
Is he too a tortured soul looking to reach the outer limits of human knowledge?
No, I think he literally just wants this one lady to be his girlfriend. It's all about chasing a lady.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's more of I think the servant's name is Robin. That's more of a Robin role.
Yeah.
For him. Okay.
And Mephistopheles is Elizabeth Hurley and is unbelievably hot.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
And is not really sympathetic at all, or enigmatic, is just straight evil, but again, incredibly hot while doing it.
You know, as a writer, as someone who aspires to write more things, if you are making a movie and you realize that you either lack the talent or time to make a character interesting, make them incredibly hot.
Just cast Elizabeth Hurley.
Yeah, if they can't be nuanced, just give them beautiful titties or abs.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Boom, Hollywood gold.
Yeah. All right. So we've got Brendan Fraser and Bedazzled. I mean, selling your soul. That's like
a very straight interpretation. And then if you want to get more, I don't know, if you want to branch out a little bit, I'm sure like there's so many different ways you can take it.
I mean, I said it off the cuff earlier, but Breaking Bad kind of is a Faustus narrative.
Sure. Yeah.
He's faced with his own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all a lot more grounded.
Mm-hmm.
But if I recall correctly, because I haven't watched it in a long time, but I think I did watch it all the way through. He ultimately winds up having to contend with the fact that he doesn't have as much control as he thought he did.
I think so. Honestly, I couldn't get through.
I want to say there's
like everyone I know watched it.
Yeah, I got kind of annoyed with it part of the way through.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like these narratives persist.
Yeah, like what do you do when you have power, and then how much power do you actually have?
Right.
You know?
And what would you do for power? Like
Yeah.
we tell that story over and over and over and over again. That's
Yeah.
like 98% of prestige TV.
Yeah.
But I will say, and one of the things that inspired this episode, there is a novel, historical fiction novel called A Tip for the Hangman. And I have to apologize to everyone who knows me interpersonally because I keep accidentally calling it A Tip for the Hangsman. And I don't know why. I just keep inserting this S in there.
That is unacceptable.
I know. I should be hanged.
You should be hangsman.
I should be hanged. But part of what made me think to do an episode about Faustus was this novel, which is a historical fictionalization of the life of Christopher Marlowe.
Oh.
It's really good. It's
Yeah.
really good. I am low-key obsessed with this book.
Okay.
Alison Epstein does a phenomenal job
Mhm.
and especially like incorporates all of the queerness, all of the ambiguity.
Oh.
And
When did this come out?
2021.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And like wherever there was a choice between having a fun story and having like a perfectly historically supportable story,
Boo.
she went fun.
Yay, Allison.
And I love her for it. But very specifically, the novel, instead of being we are going to tell the story of Christopher Marlowe beginning to end, what she's done is she's kind of blended some of the elements of the Faustus narrative with his biography.
Yeah.
And with themes from his other plays as well, and kind of spun them out across his story in a really lovely way.
Cool.
And Faustus specifically figures in sort of the final act in a way that is riveting.
Oh my gosh. Faustus as like a character that Marlowe is writing about?
The themes from the play are intercut with the closing act of this novel in a way that is phenomenal.
Okay.
And which you don't have to have read Faustus to appreciate.
Yeah.
But if you have
Well,
read...
and now you don't have to read Faustus at all.
Oh,
because you listen to this podcast.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. You don't have to read. Now that you've listened to us,
Yeah.
you will find even more gems in this book than you would have otherwise.
And it is A Tip for the Hangman by Alison Epstein.
So that is my one contemporary literature plug for this episode.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to...
Are there any other movie versions of this besides the terrible Richard Burton one?
Of the play, no. I'm certain there are other plays that, that deal with these themes, but I not like out and out movie versions of the play. Because it would be, you'd have to add a lot of stuff.
Yeah. For some reason, I can't get It's a Wonderful Life out of my head. Is that an all Faustian? No.
No, that's...
You sure?
That's something else.
There's a little angel guy in there.
Uh-huh.
You sure?
Yeah, pretty sure.
I really thought I had something there.
Better luck next time.
Have you considered this? Dr. Faustus, set at Christmas time.
I would go watch that movie. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Santa Claus as Faustus.
Uh-huh. Oh.
Wait, isn't that just the Tim Allen Santa Claus movie?
Oh, God. He never asked for this.
Why the North Pole is real and I am in it.
I know. This story truly is everywhere.
Do you have any other questions about Faustus, about Christopher Marlowe, about anything at all?
Can I borrow that book?
You absolutely can.
Yeah, it looks real good.
It is real good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to share it with you.
Yeah.
She has another book coming out soon, too.
What's that about?
I think it's called Let the Dead Bury the Dead. I do not remember off the top of my head what it's about, but I did pre-order it.
Yeah. Sounds plaguey.
I think it's post-plague. I think it's later. I think she jumped forward a few centuries.
Oh.
So
I was really hoping it was about the plague.
yeah. Oh, voodoo.
Okay.
Well, Lee,
Grace.
thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
I really enjoyed talking about Faustus and Marlowe with you.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
And, hopefully you'll be back soon and we'll talk about something else.
Yeah, we'll talk about Breaking Bad.
Is there anywhere on the internet you would like people to find you?
No.
Okay, I'll cut that part out. Well...
Sorry. Thank you so much, Grace. This was really fun.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing it again soon.
Books, 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 books.
Books. Well, I have been Grace Todd. If you would like to see what else I am up to, you can find me at grace-todd.com because someone is sitting on gracetodd.com and I don't feel like trying to buy the domain from them. You can also find me at Miss Helleborus on Twitter and Instagram.
Highly recommend.
And, if you can this week, this month, this pay period, and you feel like it, maybe consider supporting a living author because they could sure use the help.
You could forge some Dutch banknotes and throw them her way. Super chill. You won't get arrested.
Didn't Read It, the podcast does not stand behind these statements. That is not legally.
No, that is me, Lee Rossi.
This is not legally actionable.
Unequivocally telling you.
All right, don't buy your books with bankrupt coin though. Buy your books with real money and go give venture capitalists fake money.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, I love you all. Thank you for joining us.
Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, and edited by me, Grace Todd. Kaylee Hughes is our publicist and producer. You can follow the podcast on Twitter or Instagram at Didn't Read It Pod, or reach us via email at didn'treaditpod@gmail.com. For source notes and further reading, as well as a list of all existing episodes, please visit our website at didn'treaditpod.com. We are recorded in Richmond, Virginia, with special thanks to Black Iris Social Club and Pesca Trio Publishing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a review or rating on your preferred podcasting platform, or just tell a friend. If you did not enjoy today's episode, we are currently accepting applications for a full-time nemesis. Our intro music is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Our closing music for this episode is Queen Elizabeth's Pavan, composed by John Bull, another talented troublemaker who may or may not have been one of Queen Elizabeth's spies. Recording courtesy of museopen.org.